All right, welcome to Crossroads. In today's episode, we'll be talking about the Jeffrey Epstein documents now being unsealed. What has happened is that names that were previously redacted, they were blacked out. Many of these names, all but just a couple, are now revealed in the documents related to the case of Ghislaine Maxwell. I'll be going over the details of what's come out with that. We'll also be talking about how California is going to be giving free health care to illegal immigrants and make taxpayers shoulder the costs. So free for them, not for you. And also how there's $500 billion for illegal immigrants being proposed right now. We'll also talk about how Detroit groups want residents to house illegal immigrants in their own homes. Just open your doors, let them stay, maybe give them your bedroom. You can sleep on the couch. It's for the good of the world, folks. We'll be talking about what they're proposing. All right, first off, let's talk about Jeffrey Epstein. All right, the day is finally here. People have been saying for a while that, there's going to be all these big names. They were talking about possibly over 100 different names getting unsealed. Those documents are now public. Now, I've gone through them. There's like 1,000 pages of documents, and so it was a lot to go through. I've gone through them. Most of it is just the same documents from the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. They didn't really release new documents per se. Again, what they did was unsealed the names in those documents. And so now we know who some of the individuals mentioned in these reports were. And you might have seen some of the big article headlines going around. Clinton, Trump, named in Maxwell or Epstein documents. It's actually kind of misleading. So basically, the legacy media was teeing things up. Donald Trump is going to be named in the Jeffrey Epstein files. How dare you? How dare you support him? Actually, what the documents did was exonerated Donald Trump from any charges related to Epstein, at least as far as the Maxwell case goes. Who knows? Maybe there's something we've never heard of before, and somehow, like all the king's horses and all the king's men and all the different Trump investigations never found, and maybe it's just there somewhere. It's not here. The documents, the part where they have Donald Trump named, is an interview with one of the victims. And she's asked by the interviewer, did you ever see was Donald Trump one of the men with you? Was he ever at the island? Was he ever was he ever here? And she just keeps saying, not that I've seen, not that I've seen, not that I've seen. So in other words, it just proves at least some additional evidence that Donald Trump was never there, had no association with this stuff, and was not involved. But you might have seen some of the articles going around where I think I saw it was a USA Today article, and they have it in the headline, making it sound like Donald Trump was, wrapped up in this whole thing. In the article, in the body of the article, they don't even say what the document said. The fact that the only mention of Donald Trump in the Epstein documents unsealed is to exonerate him, is to say that he was not involved. They don't even have the basic respect for their readers to tell people that. They're so desperate to get this thing. But that said, there are some things related to Bill Clinton. The documents just include one line where Jeffrey Epstein apparently tells a girl, this is just according to a recounting of what he said, that Bill Clinton, Clinton likes them young. Referring to girls, in context, Clinton likes them young, is the statement. You also have a lot related to Alan Dershowitz. He's being accused of lying, of making false statements in his defense of Jeffrey Epstein. Most of that, there are some allegations of sexual misconduct. A lot of that is not quite clear yet, just in terms of, heck, is anything going to happen with it? Prince Albert is noted. He's noted in these as well. And so there are quite a few things that are likely going to be coming out. Anyways, wild times we're in. There's no clear list of names. A lot of people were saying, oh, then we're going to get a huge list of names and all this stuff. That never happened. Again, it's just the names across 1,000 pages of documents were just unredacted. And that's the only thing that's happened with this. There's going to be more documents released. Prince Andrew. Prince Andrew. Not Albert. Prince Andrew's name was mentioned in these, and Epstein allegedly, set him up to have, sexual intercourse with underage girls, according to the allegations. Again, we'll see what happens with this. There are a lot of names of, I think, lesser-known individuals, billionaires, and so on, who have been now listed in this. Again, in my personal opinion, if Epstein would have been charged with sex trafficking of underage girls, and at the very least just sex trafficking, if his associate, Ghislaine Maxwell, is in prison for doing that, and keep in mind, yes, Jeffrey Epstein killed himself or was killed of himself, before he could face proper charges. Remember that Ghislaine Maxwell was found guilty in her association with Epstein's alleged crimes. And so if you understand that Ghislaine Maxwell was guilty by association to Epstein's, activities and her involvement with that, then yes, Jeffrey Epstein was guilty of what he was accused of. He's dead, so he can't face charges for it. That said, if you have individuals charged with sex trafficking and sex trafficking of underage girls in particular, and you have clients, obviously, I would assume the clients would have to face charges at some point. And so, we'll see if anything ever comes to light with that. But the names are public now. I personally, I don't believe this would be the entire breadth of the Epstein case. Keep in mind, these are just the now unredacted documents and names related specifically to the charges against Ghislaine Maxwell. In my opinion, they in no way represent the full body of evidence that could be brought forward against Jeffrey Epstein. We do know the first time Jeffrey Epstein was put in prison, the FBI, of course, had even the video recordings from the rooms at Little St. John's, at his pedophile island. We never saw any of that evidence come to light, although we do know it exists. The public was told as much. So, again, we'll see what happens with it. The Epstein case is not closed just yet. And I think people are just getting a preview, maybe, of what's to come in the future. Hopefully. I do think these people need to see justice, personally. That said, something else is happening right now. If you're in California and you're having trouble maybe paying for health care or making your basic bills every month, just live with the comfortable knowledge that your bills are helping pay for the free health care for 700,000 illegal immigrants. California has a new plan currently in motion to give free health care to 700,000 illegal immigrants, and maybe more to be added to in the future. We'll see. And while the program will be free for people illegally entering the United States or using the broken amnesty system, local taxpayers, you are going to have to shoulder the bill. Now, this takes place as hospitals in California are already facing serious trouble as illegal immigrants are getting free treatment because they're refusing to pay. I'm sure many of you know that in America, the hospitals cannot deny care. And so if you're homeless, if you're not an American citizen, if you just plain old decide to enter the country illegally and demand free housing, well, you can go to those hospitals and just go in and just not pay. And unfortunately, the U.S. government typically has to reimburse that, but because they don't have the money for it, a lot of hospitals in America are going out of business. California's solution to that is to just give them free health care. Fox News says that California is ushering in 2024 with free health care for more than 700,000 migrants living illegally in the Golden State, as the state is faced with a looming $68 billion deficit. Because, folks, you're $68 billion in debt. What's another few billion, right? Now, it says the program, which was announced in May by Governor Gavin Newsom, will provide health insurance for approximately 700,000 illegal immigrant residents aged 26 to 49. It says California has been providing free health care insurance to illegal immigrants who are under 26 years old, and that program goes back to 2019. It says the program will begin on January 1st, 2024, so it's already started, and will provide more illegal immigrants with health insurance under the state's Medi-Cal coverage. And when he proposed the bill 2 years ago, Newsom called the expansion a transformative step towards strengthening the healthcare system for all Californians. Maybe just not California, residents who are American citizens, but, all other Californians, apparently. Now, remember, folks, illegal aliens and homeless people generally get free healthcare already. This is across the entire United States. It's because of the way our health system is set up. If you're not an American citizen, if you're homeless, if you just plain old don't feel like working, and you're off the books, if you're an illegal alien, you can go to the hospitals, you can go to the emergency room, and you can get free treatment. If you've been injured or whatever else, hospitals cannot legally turn anybody away. And the problem they face afterwards is that if a person has no identity, at least not in American books, unless they go through ICE, which they're not allowed to do right now, unless the person has a home and the ability to pay, well, they're not going to get their money. What are you going to do? Send like debt collectors after a homeless guy? They're gonna like knife fight him in the alleyway for his bottle collection. It's not going to happen. They don't get their money. And so the way it's set up is that the hospitals have to request the federal government to reimburse the costs. There are funds for that. The problem is because there's so much money being siphoned out of the system right now, the federal system to reimburse hospitals can't pay, or they're paying very, very, very little. And if a person needs to call an ambulance, and I don't know if any of you have ever had to call an ambulance before, but you're looking at least a several $1,000s bill if you drive a few blocks. It's a lot of money, and a few $100 is not going to cover the cost of that. And keep in mind, too, a lot of hospitals, they use private businesses for that. And so it's not like hospitals can just not pay it. The cost of this for the hospital gets footed, by, first of all, the hospital, and that's why a lot of them are going out of business, normally by the federal government, which means you and I pay for it out of our taxes. But if that money dries up, it needs to come out of the state. And the problem they're having with that is, the states are running out of money too. So frankly, I don't know what California is thinking right now on a personal level. Maybe they got a plan, they're just not communicating it very well. $68 billion in debt. Maybe they think if they drive it far enough, it'll reset to zero, like the speedometer, like the mileage in your car. You max it out and it just goes back to. Maybe they think debt works that way. I don't know. It's California, folks. Speaking of which, Epoch Times says that some hospitals in Southern California are struggling with an influx of illegal immigrants amid the border crisis. No kidding, right? It says while American patients are enduring longer wait times for doctor appointments due to a nursing shortage in the state, according to two healthcare professionals. It says a healthcare worker at a hospital in Southern California, who asked to not be named for fear of losing her job, told the Epoch Times that the entire healthcare system is just being bombarded by a steady stream of illegal migrants in recent years who we presume don't feel like paying. And she said that, they're falling off the wall. They're always being flown. In other words, they're being life-flighted to these American hospitals. She said they're never put in the back of an ambulance, with a typical helicopter rescue costing about $30,000 without factoring in the cost of medication and medical staff at the hospital. She questioned, who pays for that? Well, the answer is clear. American taxpayers pay for that. Now, they said as well that our healthcare system is so overwhelmed, and then add on top of that tuberculosis, COVID-19, and other diseases from all over the world. And well, you're looking at the problem that America is facing right now as we provide free healthcare to illegal aliens. Now, that being said, there was an update on this as well. You might have seen that in Texas, they're actually starting to enforce the laws that the federal government just plain old doesn't feel like enforcing. Namely there's many laws they don't feel like enforcing, like, basic crime laws, but in particular about illegally entering the United States. As the country is being flooded with hundreds of thousands of illegal aliens every single month, and Americans are paying the bill for their housing and food and medical costs and whatever else they need. You have now Texas that has made it a crime to illegally enter Texas from another country. Normally, of course, border security is one of the few traditional responsibilities of the federal government. And the federal government is no longer fulfilling its basic responsibilities on that. Instead, they are facilitating the mass migration, working in cahoots with the United Nations into the United States. And interestingly, after what happened in Texas, where, Texas is like, well, we're going to enforce the laws, you will not. What happens? The Biden administration is now suing Texas. The Biden administration is suing Texas for enforcing border laws. You getting that? They're trying to make Texas tear down, barriers, cut barbed wire, and so on, and to not deport people. Because as Texas is now making it a crime to illegally enter the state from another country, they're making it so that, if you're arrested once, you get sent back. If you enter again, you can be charged with a crime. The Biden administration is suing them for that. And, again, I personally think that's probably going to go to the Supreme Court. I don't think it's going to hold up on the federal end of the Supreme Court. I think Texas has the higher ground legally on this. And it's probably going to bring up a lot of other issues, such as our delinquent government not fulfilling its basic responsibilities. Now, that said, you might be wondering, well, can we afford it? What's a few more $1 billion? Well, the amount they're estimating that illegal aliens are costing the United States is about $500 billion. And of course, that's currently, keep in mind, people are mostly coming here right now for economic reasons. They're coming here to escape global warming, which is imaginary, but don't tell them that. And as they come here, of course, they're demanding all kinds of free handouts. Those free handouts are not free for us. They're free for them. American taxpayers foot the bill. And of course, as you promise more things, and if people are coming here to get the free things, you can expect more people to come as you promise more free things. And again, all of this is really just skyrocketing in cost. You might remember back in November 2023, folks, House Republicans released a report, and it was titled The Historic Dollar Costs of DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas' Open Border Policies. By the way, they're trying to impeach Mayorkas right now over this. And they say, well, guess how much Americans could be paying for illegal immigrants? Well, the number for that is about $451 billion. American taxpayers are footing a $451 billion bill to pay for the free housing, free medical care, free everything else for all the illegal aliens wanting to come here for all the free stuff we're promising them. Here's what it says in the report. This is according to the House of Representatives Republican Interim Staff Report from November of 2023. If you want to look it up, it's on page 3. Let me show you. It says, every day, millions of American taxpayer dollars are spent on costs directly associated with illegal immigration and the unprecedented crisis at the southwest border sparked by Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas' policies. Only a small fraction is ever recouped from the taxes paid by illegal aliens, with the rest falling on the shoulders of American citizens and lawful residents. Mass illegal immigration, accelerated by Mayorkas' open borders policy, now represents a massive cost to the federal government and state governments alike, as well as the pocketbooks of private citizens and businesses. I would argue that federal government, state government, their money also comes from the pocketbooks of private citizens and businesses. It's not like the federal government, works like a job outside of something we pay for. It's not like state governments run businesses on the side. Maybe they do. Maybe human trafficking is a big thing now. But for the most part, they get all their money from private citizens and businesses, and the money they use, at the very least, to pay for this stuff comes from private citizens and businesses. So it's all from that. The report continues stating, the range of costs inflicted by Mayorkas' border crisis cover everything from emergency medical care to increased demands on law enforcement to housing and shelter benefits for illegal aliens. Many additional costs involve devoting resources to many uses Americans would never think of. Who knows what we're paying for, folks? It says further in, the annual cost just goes to care for and house the unknown gotaways and illegal aliens who have been released into the country under Mayorkas' leadership. And it says it could cost as much as an astounding $451 billion. Now, this is having a serious impact on American citizens, as you might suspect, especially in sanctuary cities, like right here in New York City, where I'm recording right now, where New York City Mayor Eric Adams is actually saying it publicly. Let me show you what he's saying.
Our residents are weary, our residents are angry, our residents are seeing the impact of the migrant and asylum seeker issue, how it is taken away from the resources that should go to the day-to-day services of running the city. We did not walk out from DC with any level of optimism that anything is going to drastically change. It is clear that for the time being, this crisis is going to be carried by the cities. Here in New York City, as you know, we had a very painful November plan that we had to produce, and now we're looking forward or in the direction of how do we address the $7 billion budget deficit that we have to address in January.
Now look, facing this crisis, there are a few different solutions on the table. One of them being proposed by, Chicago and New York is to make it so that, for example, the federal government pays for it. Because states are going bankrupt, and of course the federal government also gets its money from taxpayers, and taxpayers in all these states have to pay into the federal government. So what if we just make the federal government pay for all of it? What a solution. Make the taxpayers and all across the United States have an equitable approach to solving this, where the taxpayers in states that don't have, for example, sanctuary city laws can foot the bill for the states that do. That's what's being proposed by a lot of the blue states, especially, for example, Chicago and New York. But folks, there are some other proposed solutions out there, and it may sound crazy, but one of them, as I mentioned, is to allow the states to actually enforce the law on immigration. What a concept. Enforce the law on immigration. Just the News says that a coalition of 26 state attorneys general is calling on the new U.S. Speaker of the House to pass a Florida-sponsored bill that would grant states the authority to enforce federal immigration law when the federal government refuses to do so. The AGs, led by Florida Attorney General Ashley Moody, sent a letter to Speaker Mike Johnson, again a Republican from Louisiana, on Monday. And in it, they called on Congress to pass U.S. Representative Bill Posey's bill. This is the Immigration Enforcement Partnership Act. And Posey, also a Republican from Florida, first filed the measure in 2022 and again in March of 2023. And this is what he said. He said, quote, "On day one, President Joe Biden began intentionally dismantling our public safety immigration structure." It says here that the President and U.S. Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas have, quote, "outright ignored federal law, and we have uncovered numerous secret plans to allow for the mass release of unvetted and inadmissible migrants," she said, and referring to Florida's border-related lawsuits against the administration. Now, it says here that the administration's parole and mass release policies are, quote, "not only in direct conflict with federal law, but it has also put American safety in jeopardy." Now, briefly on that, of course, the federal government under normal circumstances is responsible for securing the border. And they've found a lot of different loopholes to allow for things they can't normally do. One of them being, of course, the policy of having people apply for amnesty. And, after just gaming the amnesty system, they have to wait for their trial. They no longer have the Remain in Mexico program that, again, Trump made, where if you apply for it, yeah, you can apply, but you're going to wait on the other side of the border, so we don't have to foot the bill for you. And, that was actually working for a bit. they've made it so that you wait inside the United States. And it's like some of those cases are like 10 years out. You know, you're going to have people, if they ever even show up for court, which there's nothing forcing them to, we don't even know who most of them are. If they ever even show up for court, it's going to be like 10 years from now. And who knows, you know, maybe they're going to have like 10 kids and 5 grandkids by then. You know what I mean? Now, in addition to that, they were also gaming the parole system. Biden changed the way the parole system is used. Normally, Americans, you know, it's not legal for illegal aliens to just come here and get, you know, free housing and free food and welfare and all that stuff. What they've done, the Biden administration, is they give parole to all the illegal aliens. And when they give them parole, that makes them eligible to get social welfare and all the other free government handouts that are normally reserved for U.S. citizens. And so while some people would say, oh, you know, they can't actually get money from us, let them do what the heck they want, you know, we need, as Pelosi would say, you know, who's going to pick the oranges, right? Who's going to pick the oranges? Well, the problem is nobody's doing it because they don't have to. They just come here and go on welfare because they're being given access to the parole system. And as soon as they get it, they're eligible for all the social benefits. Now, again, that law that would allow states to enforce federal immigration law when the federal government is being delinquent on its responsibilities, Texas is kind of leading, well, they are leading the charge on this. Texas has made it so that based on state law, that if you enter Texas from another country, right? Mexico is the only other country they border on, and unless they break away and they regard all the other surrounding American states as another country, which Republicans have blocked, by the way. Texas is not going to secede from the Union, at least just not yet. But they found a way to make it, using state law, a crime to illegally enter the country. It is possible you could see other U.S. states, you know, replicate the Texas law. Of course, not all states dealing with the immigration crisis share a border with Mexico. And so they would have to rewrite that a bit based on local law. It could be that if you are in the country illegally, that'd be hard because they're giving them amnesty and parole and so on. They would have to find a way to make it so that these illegal aliens being brought in would be violating the law if they did. You know, Florida could technically do it. A few other states could technically do it. But right now, Texas is facing a lawsuit from the federal government for doing that. And so whatever happens with Texas, and I'd assume this is going to head pretty soon to the Supreme Court, whatever happens there is going to determine what the law of the land is for the whole country. Now, again, that's mainly in Republican states. The Republican solution to the illegal immigration crisis is to secure the border and, you know, enforce the law on immigration. The Democrat states have other solutions, like, for example, make American taxpayers pay for it from the federal level. Or, you know, maybe just find other ways to give people free housing. We'll be talking about this. Now, before I get into these other solutions, part 2 of our documentary, The Real Story of January 6th, we are releasing it this Saturday. Again, folks, we have a new documentary coming out this Saturday. This is The Real Story of January 6th, Part 2. And Part 1 is now free to watch until then. If you haven't seen it or you want to watch it again, go check it out. It's on Epoch TV. We have some pretty big information, some real explosive stuff in there. Link in the description below and also in the live chat. I believe this will seriously change the narratives on January 6th and what has happened since in this country. This is going to be a very important documentary, again, airing this Saturday on Epoch TV, EpochTV.com. So again, if you're not a member of Epoch TV yet, come join us. What are you waiting for? Let me show you a quick teaser, and I'll go into some more stories with y'all, then we'll jump into some questions.
The biggest investigation in FBI history.
There are more than 1,100 arrests.
I sacrificed my dream job to share this information with the American people.
Those involved must be held accountable.
He's an innocent man.
It's going to change narratives no matter what your political perspective is.
All right, again, that is going to be on Epoch TV, EpochTV.com, and that airs this Saturday, so don't miss it, folks. Now, that said, we were discussing the other solutions to illegal immigration. We talked about the red state solutions, what the Republicans want to do, and we're now talking about the blue states, what the Democrat cities want to do. And of course, they have many different proposals from, well, give them all free handouts to make the federal government pay for it, to give them free health care. Because sure, that might somehow make people not want to come here, right? In Detroit, they're saying that they want residents to open their doors and house illegal immigrants in their own homes. This is town hall. Now, in Detroit, this is being proposed by a private group. It's an NGO. Keep in mind that they were proposing very similar things in New York. This was in New York, it was coming from the city itself. The New York, government wanted American citizens to open their doors and house illegal immigrants. In Detroit now, a group called the African Bureau for Immigration and Social Affairs, an NGO, they're asking Americans to do the same thing. Town Hall says that this NGO that settles and cares for African migrants is trying to decide in the U.S. is working to find shelters for illegal migrants as the crisis gets worse. And here's what they had to say. We've been calling on administrators. We have seen the lack of support services that are for that specific community, primarily working with black immigrants. The founder of the group, Senegalese native Sedir Star, said, and he added, we have been working to secure the understanding that these people are here and something needs to be done about it. So what needs to be done? Well, Starr said that Detroit does not have tent encampments along the highway and sidewalks because community members have stepped up and offered their homes as shelters and suggesting that we should all just do the same. So, if you have a free couch, if you have an extra bedroom, heck, if you don't, and you just want to sleep on the floor for the good of humanity and let that illegal alien take your bed. That's the solution right here, folks. It's going to start looking a bit like, you ever see that Charlton Heston movie, Soylent Green? You have people like sleeping in stairwells and stuff. Well, it keeps going that way. That might be just where we are. In New York, by the way, in New York City, they're saying that we're out of housing, and the mayor here is saying that people are going to start having to sleep on the streets. Who knows what they're going to end up doing? They're already housing people at airports and just about anywhere else they can possibly find because it's winter here. We're already at this point. And again, the solution being proposed by many Democrat mayors is not to actually enforce the law. Again, many of them want the federal government and American taxpayers to foot the bill for them. Let me show you this. Just the News said that Chicago Mayor Brendan Johnson is part of a trio of Democrat mayors urging the federal government to help deal with the inflow of non-citizen arrivals. Johnson, New York City Mayor Eric Adams, and Denver Mayor Mike Johnston hosted a three-person news event Wednesday where all three called upon President Joe Biden for help. And here's what they had to say. This is according to Johnson. It said, quote, Chicago will always be a welcoming city, but we need collaboration at all levels of government and our federal partners to provide the necessary coordination and resources so that cities like Chicago, Denver, and New York have what is needed to do this crucial work. They're doing the Lord's work, folks. Now, of course, that being said, I would say that people are coming here because they know they're going to get free stuff. If you stop ringing the dinner bell, they might stop coming for dinner. Just a hypothetical here. And of course, if you promise more stuff, you're probably going to get more people coming for more of that free stuff. Now, some states are trying to stem the flow of illegal immigrants by limiting the number of people who can enter the states. Chicago is rolling out a plan like this right now, making it so that there's limits on the ability of buses to just drive in and drop people off. In New York City, they've done that. And already, well, it looks like the illegal immigrants have found a way to get around that barrier. That boundary, that artificial boundary that has been formed, blocking them from illegally entering New York, they've found a way to cross that illegal boundary. It's incredible that these individuals are so resourceful. In this case, they found that you can just go to New Jersey and you can take the train into New York instead of the bus, because the laws only relate to the buses, not to the trains. And so they're just taking the train into New York. And you can probably watch that be replicated across many other areas as well. The Hill reported, it says, after New York City Mayor Eric Adams restricted bus arrivals last week in an effort to curb a surge of migrants, bus operators appeared to have found a loophole by dropping migrants off at a New Jersey train station from which they can just, take the train into the city. It says that under an executive order announced last week, Eric Adams is requiring bus operators who are aware they are transporting migrants, although they can just say, hey, I wasn't aware. But he's making it so that, if there's fares paid for by a third party to provide the city with a notice of at least 32 hours ahead of time, they're not even doing that. They're just dropping them off in Jersey. Now, they're dropping them off mainly, apparently, at Secaucus Junction train station, which is about a 15-minute ride from New York City. Now, Tyler Jones, a spokesperson from New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy's office, said that bus operators are also dropping off migrants at train stations all throughout the state. And so apparently that's the way they're doing it now. Now, remember, a lot of these officials, like in New York and all these other blue states, they're mainly blaming Texas for this. They're saying, how could the governor of Texas do this to our states, busing like a couple dozen, buses into our cities and dropping people off? It's actually severely misleading. A lot of those buses are not being run by the state of Texas. A lot of those buses are being run by NGOs, non-governmental organizations. And the way this system works is the Biden administration bankrolls the whole thing using your money. That goes mainly through the State Department, which gives money to United Nations Refugee Resettlement and to the International Organization for Migration, also under the United Nations. Those two organizations of the United Nations run huge encampments all throughout Latin America, including in the Darien Gap. Big, they call them... it's International Organization for Migration, IOM. It's also translated as OIM in certain parts of Latin America because just the way the language works. Those camps facilitate a lot of the mass migration. But when they get to the United States and there are some restrictions under the law, they pass that responsibility to NGOs like Catholic, charities and so on like that. And these NGOs then run the buses and everything else to facilitate the mass, migration of these individuals to every corner of the country. The Democrat governors in a lot of U.S. states have severely misrepresented this basic fact. And instead, they're blaming Texas for it, saying all the buses are coming from Texas. Texas is trying to secure the border and deport people, and the Biden administration is suing them for that. So let that sink in. Now, look, although Texas has played a small role in this, keep in mind they're only sending a small fraction of illegal immigrants by bus. And again, they're already being flown into the country anyway by Democrat open border policies. You even have like the military running some of these flights. You have mass amounts of flights being paid for, mostly by your tax dollars. Now, the leftist establishment is also noting that Republicans are winning the narrative on the border war. Newsbusters said that Stacey Matthews at Legal Insurrection, better known as Sister Toja, reported CNN hosts are alarmed enough about Joe Biden's approval ratings on immigration that they had to sound the alarm and admit that Republicans are winning the opinion battle on the border crisis. They say it's a crisis for CNN when Democrats are in danger of losing. And for Democrats, the country is seeing their border policies in action as something that's going to cost them votes, very likely in the upcoming election. Now, briefly on this, Joe Biden was recently questioned by reporters as he was walking, coming off his plane. With a deep, deep sunburn because he's been on vacation yet again. Joe Biden was questioned, hey, when are you going to do something about the border? When are you going to do something? He's like, as soon as I get the money from Republicans. there's some technicalities with this. You know, when are you going to secure the border? As soon as I get the money for it. First of all, the Biden administration is not securing the border. This is why you have states like Texas trying to do it themselves. This is why you have attorneys general throughout the United States, mostly in red states, trying to make it so that the states themselves can step forward and fulfill the role of the federal government when the federal government is delinquent on its duties. The federal government is paying for, using your money, the facilitation of mass illegal immigration into the United States. And they've even manipulated laws to allow for that to happen, such as gaming the parole system and the amnesty system. Now, the technicality of what Biden is talking about is that, of course, we still don't really have our spending plans for the United States. The federal government's budget is still not all the way through. They're kind of putting it into action piecemeal. We recently got the defense budget, but one of the things Republicans are doing right now is they're telling the Democrats, we are not going to give you money for Ukraine or anywhere else. We're not going to give you that defense money unless you secure the border. And Democrats, who at this time do not seem to be interested in securing the border, are refusing to do that. And so even though they say they want to defend Ukraine, and I'd say many Republicans do as well, Republicans are using that as leverage to force the Democrats to agree to a policy where we actually secure the American border. And it's Democrats blocking that. And so it's actually very misleading when they're suggesting that, you know, that the border is not being secured because of Republicans. You could say that, you know, Ukraine is not being funded because of Republicans. That's fair. But actually the Democrats are the ones blocking the border security right now. That said, there's some other stuff happening as well, because the border crisis is actually breaking the Democrats, it seems. This is not going to work well for them at the polls. It's not a good policy for them, at least in my opinion. Hot Air reported that the Washington Post's Aaron Blake pointed to a Siena College poll released Monday, and guess what? It shows a majority of New York Democrats now sound a lot more, they say, like GOP immigration hawks. It says that 75% of New York Democrats said the recent influx of migrants to the state was at least a somewhat serious problem. Nearly half of them, 47%, said it was a very serious problem. 53% of New York Democrats agreed with the statement that New Yorkers have already done enough for new migrants and should now work to slow the flow of migrants to New York. Now look, this is also causing some really serious rifts with Black Americans, especially people in communities where they depend on government handouts. Now look, you might remember, this is from Thanksgiving, you might remember it. Let me give you a preview of what these policies look like in these poor neighborhoods. Let me show you this.
Why do we have to take the butt of everything? Okay, this community here is already suffering.
The residents living in NYCHA's Queensbridge houses look forward to the mobile food pantries that show up weekly. But over the past year, they have witnessed 8,000 migrants move into their neighborhood, and they have also noticed the migrants are also starting to take their stuff.
They was first online for the turkeys this morning. If they tell you to be there at 11 o'clock, you get there like 10:30, 10:45, but they already out there. The line is from over there to over here.
Free food giveaways, especially during the holidays, have become a source of tension between longtime New Yorkers struggling to get by and newly arrived migrants who are using the system to survive. A month ago, one altercation got so heated between a resident and a migrant, someone ended up in the hospital.
We would never turn anyone away for a meal, but there simply just is not enough for both NYCHA residents and the migrant shelter residents.
Now look, facing these problems, you might be wondering, well, what's Biden going to do about it? What's his argument for 2024? You know, how is he defending himself? What is he going to do? Is he saying he's going to secure the border? No, actually. The narrative coming from the Biden administration is that Donald Trump would make migration problems even worse. And he's blaming a lot of this on Trump and saying that his administration, the Biden administration, is securing the border, which they're not. This has been the narrative since around Thanksgiving. Now, remember the Biden-Harris headquarters on X? They posted a series of handy guides for Thanksgiving Let me show you some of the handy guides that the Biden administration was releasing. This is according to their official account. It says, your handy guide for responding to crazy MAGA nonsense this Thanksgiving. So what are they saying against this malarkey? Well, they have a list of quote unquote helpful talking points on topics such as the economy, Social Security, and Medicare, and a few others. But let me show you the one on immigration in particular. This is the Biden administration argument on the border. They say, the argument is Trump secured the border, and Biden administration says, no, he didn't. All he did was separate families, put children in cages, and leave behind a broken immigration system for Joe Biden to clean up. Now, just to clarify, that's actually a lie. First of all, the photo of the kids in cages was from a protest that was falsely reported by most of the mainstream media, and the only kids in cages photos came from during the Obama administration. The separate families were not actually families. That was a policy to DNA test people coming across with children because the children are being human trafficked. And of course, in order to make sure that the human traffickers are not using kids as tools, to come across illegally, they had a policy to DNA test them and make sure they're actually the guardians or parents. And they found that most of them were not. The policy of separate families was the anti-child trafficking policy. And they say, of course, it left behind a broken immigration system for Joe Biden to clean up. I'm sorry, folks. Yeah, we can see that Joe Biden is working very hard to clean up the border crisis. Of course, you might remember that the Trump policy was to build a wall and to enforce the border laws. The Democrats were actually blocking that. But they're saying as well that if he's reelected, Donald Trump, he's promising to make it worse. And they're saying that Donald Trump's plan is rounding up Latinos into mass detention camps, ending birthright citizenship, and shooting people at will. Now, I have not personally seen that Donald Trump wants to allow us to shoot people at will or round up all Latinos into mass detention camps or any of that. I think he does want to end birthright citizenship. Of course, chain migration is a policy Trump has mentioned. To clarify this, Donald Trump has said that he does want to have mass deportations for all illegal immigrants. And so there is some truth to that. He did say he wants to deport all illegal immigrants. He also does want to end chain migration, making it so that, if you come here, you can't just bring the whole family from whatever country you come from. And he has talked about ending birthright citizenship. So if you have pregnant women coming here and they have a kid, that kid does not automatically get American citizenship because that is incentivized long-term illegal immigration, where you have people coming here illegally, they have kids, and then they're here forever, even if they were here illegally in the first place. I don't know about shooting people at will. I haven't seen that one. But, there's some creative writing going on here, apparently. Now, that said, folks, let's jump into some questions. I should clarify. I think the only thing Trump has talked about was shooting people was if, for example, someone breaks into your home or something like that. Or if, there's like these mass lootings that people should be able to defend their businesses. He has talked about that. All right, folks, that says jump into some questions. So let's see here. Also, we're doing the full episode today on all the other sites you might know. Every Tuesday and Thursday, we're doing full episodes on Twitter and YouTube and Facebook and all that. Which means, of course, it'll have to keep the extra sensitive stuff on the days we don't, namely Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Let's see, questions from Ever Present Now. First off, you're saying, do the people of California not learn that they are paying for this with higher direct taxes, lost services, and no structural improvements? Is all of this okay with the majority of California Democrats, or aren't the high crimes and crumbling California city problems bad enough? Yeah, no, I'm aware. It all depends on where you're from in California. I've mentioned I'm from San Diego originally, which, it's where the Pacific Ocean meets the Mexico border. It's the far left, lower left-hand corner of the United States. San Diego is unique. I love San Diego. It's a military community. A lot of the military bases and naval bases are there. Camp Pendleton's there. you know. One of my dad's friends used to live in the Top Gun house in Oceanside. We used to stay at the Top Gun house when I was a kid. It's a great place. I love San Diego. The issue you have in San Diego, though, or sorry, in California, though, is a lot of California is actually pretty conservative. But Los Angeles and San Francisco pretty much sway the entire state. And so a lot of people who live in the more rural areas, a lot of people who don't live in Los Angeles or San Francisco, a lot of them disagree with those policies, but they get forced into them because of Los Angeles and San Francisco. Keep in mind that California used to be a Republican state. I believe it was actually a Republican when they gave mass citizenship to illegal aliens. That California flipped from a red state to a blue state. That was Reagan, I believe. When Reagan gave citizenship to all the illegal aliens, California went from a Republican state to a Democrat state. And of course, you know, I think a lot of that has to do with mainly Los Angeles, which is the second largest Spanish-speaking city in the entire world, by the way. So take it as you will. That being said, though, I think there was a big change that took place. When Obama was elected, they found that about 80% of Latinos voted Democrat. And it was after they found that polling that Democrats went very strong on the idea of open borders and, you know, giving citizenship to all illegal immigrants, because they were believing that they'd get like 80% of the vote, that they'd get all the Latino vote. There's actually a shift now. A lot of Latinos are now shifting to be more Republican. I'd say that morally and culturally, a lot of Latinos are more conservative. A lot of them are Catholic. They have very strong family values. I think the immigration issue was always kind of the split with them. But now that, of course, they're seeing the open border policies and so on, a lot of them don't support it, at least not statistically. And so, you know, Democrats are risking losing the Latino vote. In fact, if you even look at what's happening in a lot of Latin America, you had they called it the pink wave in the 90s, where you had a lot of socialist governments take over. It's now heading the other way. You have some actually pretty dang good governments coming into office in Latin America. Look at El Salvador right now, for example. The El Salvador president is doing great, in my opinion. You have Milei coming in, who's more of a libertarian. We'll see how he does. He's still very new. You have Lula, who kind of took office in Brazil. I don't know how much I believe it personally. But, you know, there's been a big shift culturally through a lot of Latin America. And I think that is reflected very strongly in the United States as well among Latinos. You know, they are more conservative, I think, than people probably give them credit for. And so I think Democrats understand they're probably going to lose a lot of that vote. Let's see here. And of course, that does have a huge impact on California as well. Ted France, you're saying, when will people start fighting back? We need a civil war to put politicians back in their place, just like 1776. I understand the sentiment. I personally don't think it would be a positive thing for us. I think that if we did have a civil war in this country, it would be detrimental because you'd probably have other countries step in. The Chinese Communist Party, maybe even Russia, would very likely use that and intervene and try to take over the process. I don't think it would be a good thing for us whatsoever. And that being said, I do think there are still legal and peaceful ways of resolving the differences we have as Americans, and I do hope that we find a way to resolve our differences. I do think that there needs to be a coming together of Americans rather than a breaking apart. If you were to ask me, a lot of the problems we have stem from demoralization operations carried out mainly by communist groups. I'd point blame mainly at Soviet subversion and now Chinese Communist Party subversion. The purpose of these is to divide people. The purpose is to drive a wedge between people. And I do think that the increased tensions we have are very much a reflection of that. I grew up in a country that seems very different from the one we live in currently. When I was a kid, Republican, Democrat, it didn't matter who you were. I think people could be friends regardless of any of that. I don't think political differences were such a dividing point for people. I think that because things have been pushed to such an extreme, and when I'm talking about extreme, I'm mainly talking about like trans policies and open border policies and defund the police policies and really wild things that have been implemented that are very divisive. And I think we have, unfortunately, a very extremist, very far left, communist extremist element that has taken over the grassroots, mainly on the left. And that very extreme system of policies is causing a lot of the divisions we have. And I don't think that's healthy for us. I think that if we ever come to a point where we can enforce basic law and maybe have a coming to terms with the corruption in this country, maybe people will see justice, I think that would restore the stability of the United States. I think that's actually what's needed at this point. I think until Americans see justice return, they're not going to be satisfied with it. And I do think it is an unfortunate reality that if we don't find a peaceful way to, resolve our differences, that it is possible we could see a civil war. I personally hope that day doesn't come, but it is possible. Crash Bandit, you're saying, could this free health care be how the government controls how the hospitals operate by making the people foot the bill, just like the bank bailouts? Well, there's a few different points with it. So first of all, the hospitals are going out of business right now. Hospitals, for the most part, are private businesses. And right now, currently, when you have illegal aliens showing up and gaming the system, because again, the hospitals cannot legally turn people away, illegal aliens are already getting free health care. They already get it. And so where they're talking about policies of giving them free health care, what that does is makes it so that the American taxpayer has to foot the bill rather than the hospitals. And so because of Obamacare and the policies where we all have to pay into these, healthcare policies, and it's reflected in our premiums, we have to foot the bill. Thanks Obama. We have to foot, and Biden, by the way, we have to foot the bill for that. It means that the costs are less on the hospitals. And so in my opinion, this is more like California trying to save the hospitals from going out of business by making it so that American taxpayers, through the form of, our premiums on our healthcare costs, making it so that American taxpayers keep the hospitals going and make it so the hospitals don't collapse from the huge number of people just robbing the hospitals. And I would consider this robbery. Again, normally the federal government will reimburse the hospitals for those costs, but there's a limit to how much money they can pay out for it. And when you have that many people just showing up and demanding free care and free life flights on helicopters and free ambulances and free whoever knows what else, our hospital system is going to go belly up. It's a broken system and it's dying right now. This is actually a really serious crisis for America, that our hospitals are going out of business. That's a whole other issue. Actually, Epoch Times, we did a documentary on that just recently. You can watch it on Epoch TV, in fact, about the crisis being faced with hospitals right now. Let's see here. But that being said, I see it as more of a way of saving the hospitals from collapse by deferring the costs to taxpayers by manipulating the good old Obamacare. Those of you curious too, the documentary we have on the crisis being faced with hospitals, it's called Flatline. It's called Flatline. It's available on Epoch TV, EpochTV.com. And if you're an Epoch Times subscriber, you can watch it already. Peter Parker, you're saying they give it away, and the rest of us and the rest of us in the good states pay. Yeah, that's how it goes. It's equitable. It's global equity. It's not just the well-to-do people anymore. It's the well-to-do nations having to shoulder the costs of the less well-to-do nations. Not only do we already send money to like every country on earth. Remember Trump was saying, you know, God forbid we ever find life on other planets because we probably start sending them money, you know. God forbid we find alien life because we probably start sending them pallets of cash if we did, because America sends money to everybody else. Now, not only are we not just sending money to every corner of the world and all these countries that hate our guts and give us nothing in return, but we're even inviting them all here and giving them free handouts on American soil, paid for by you and I, folks. I swear, America is the weirdest empire in world history. We've achieved the dream of Alexander, and here we are giving free healthcare to illegal aliens. All right, folks, that said, I'll be doing an episode tomorrow as well, 10:30 a.m. Eastern time, so don't miss that. And also, I'm going to be heading to Taiwan to cover the elections there and talk about the possible invasion by the Chinese Communist Party. I'm going to be still doing the show while I'm in Taiwan, but we'll be having some special broadcasts. So big news. Yeah, I'll be traveling a bit more these days, and we'll have some special coverage when I'm going to different places. Also, do not miss our documentary airing this Saturday. It's the real story of January 6th, Part 2. The first one we did had a pretty big impact. I think the second one, the one coming out on Saturday, is also going to have a pretty big impact, so don't miss it. In the meantime, again, it's available for free to all Epoch TV subscribers, so if you subscribe to Epoch TV, you can watch it. In the meantime, we also have the first documentary, The Real Story of January 6th, available to everybody for free until Saturday. So if you haven't seen it yet, go watch it. That's on EpochTV.com, EpochTV.com. All right, folks, that said, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate all of you, and as always, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free.